Welcome, everybody, and this is the story of how the Philadelphia Eagles went from top of the NFL to the league's basement. The story all starts at the U.S. Bank Stadium in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
For the Philadelphia Eagles, the long drought is over. Finally. Last championship, 1960, pre-Super Bowl era. And the Philly fans, the dream has finally come true. Lombardi Trophy.
Quarterback Nick Foles was a Super Bowl MVP that year, recording 373 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. In the draft that season, the Philadelphia Eagles would go on to select tight end Dallas Goedert, who would later become a big part of the Philadelphia Eagles offense. In the following season, the Philadelphia Eagles looked to become the first team to get to back-to-back Super Bowls since the New England Patriots in 2003 and 2004. The Philadelphia Eagles would also acquire wide receiver Golden Tate from the Detroit Lions in exchange for a 2019 third-round pick. Later on in the season, the Philadelphia Eagles would also acquire defensive end Michael Bennett and a 7th round pick from the Seattle Seahawks in exchange for wide receiver Marcus Johnson and a 5th round pick. The Eagles had injuries to Carson Wentz, Alshon Jeffrey, and Richard Rodgers prior to the start of the NFL season. This meant that backup quarterback Nick Foles had to start the season. Starting quarterback Carson Wentz was able to return in Week 3 against Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts in a game in which he threw for 255 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, including a game-winning drive to give the Eagles a lead with 3 minutes left in the game. The Eagles would suffer multiple injuries as the season went on, including injuries to Ronnie McLeod, Ronald Darby, Jalen Mills, and Jay Ajayi, and many other players. Due to a combination of injuries and experiencing Super Bowl hangover, the Eagles went 4-6 in their first 10 games of the season. It looked like their playoff hopes were dying. Despite those reasons, the Eagles would manage to win 5 of their next 6 games and finish the season with a record of 9-7. But for the second season in a row, Carson Wentz would suffer another late season injury, this time to his back. This would thrust Nick Foles back into the starting lineup for the second time this season, and once again tasked with leading the Philadelphia Eagles to a Super Bowl victory. In the playoffs, the Philadelphia Eagles would face a feared Bears defense. This Bears defense was considered by many one of the best defenses of the decade. They ranked first in points against, forced turnovers, interceptions, total rushing yards against, and third in total yards against. Led by Khalil Mack, this was a team that many had as their dark horse contender for the Super Bowl. This matchup between the two teams would prove to be a defensive battle, as both teams struggled to put points on the board. But late in the game, Nick Foles and the Philadelphia offense would score and give the Eagles a lead with less than 1 minute to go in the game. Not to be outdone, Mitch Trubisky would get the Bears into field goal range and allow them to set up the game-winning field goal.
And he hits the upright again! That's impossible! And the Eagles run out into the field, but there's still 5 seconds.
After surviving a 16-15 victory over the Chicago Bears, the Philadelphia Eagles would go on to face the New Orleans Saints in the next round of the playoffs. The Philadelphia Eagles surprised many people around the league when they led the New Orleans Saints 14-0 at the half. Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints would come out of the half and score 20 unanswered points. Then, Nick Foles was able to lead the Philadelphia Eagles down the field to around the New Orleans Saints 27, where on a 2nd and 10 play, he targeted wide receiver Alshon Jeffrey, but the ball deflected off his hands and into the hands of Saints cornerback Marshawn Lattimore for an interception and thus sealing the game. Following a loss to Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints, the Philadelphia Eagles would pick up running back Miles Sanders from Penn State in the draft. In addition to Miles Sanders, the Philadelphia Eagles would also draft wide receiver J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Unfortunately for the Philadelphia Eagles, and like many other teams, they missed out on a potential star wide receiver in DK Metcalf, who is currently tearing it up in the league with Russell Wilson as his quarterback. With the expiration of Nick Foles' contract, the Eagles had to choose between the man who led them to a Super Bowl victory a couple seasons ago and the man who was a 2017 MVP finalist. The Eagles would ultimately commit to having Carson Wentz as the quarterback of the future and letting Nick Foles walk in free agency. Nick Foles would go on to sign a 4-year, $88 million contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Foles would ultimately only last 1 year in Jacksonville and was traded to Chicago the following season. Carson Wentz, on the other hand, would go on to sign a 4-year, $128 million extension with the Philadelphia Eagles. Adding to an already busy offseason for the Philadelphia Eagles, wide receiver Golden Tate, who didn't really work out in Peterson's offense since his acquisition, would leave the Philadelphia Eagles and head over to the New York Giants. Prior to the start of the 2019 NFL season, the Eagles also acquired wide receiver Deshaun Jackson and running back Jordan Howard. Expectations were high for Wentz this season after signing the huge contract extension in the offseason. But the 2019 NFL season would start off similar to the 2018 NFL season, as the Eagles were injury-riddled once again and started the season off very slow. Almost everyone on the Eagles' offense was injured. The Eagles literally lost their wide receiver 1, 2, and 3, and their RB 1 and 2. This forced random people to come into the starting lineup off the practice squad, such as Joshua Perkins and Robert Davis. The Eagles held a record of 5-7 coming into Week 13, but similar to last season, the Eagles would string together 4 straight wins. Those 4 wins came predominantly because of the great play from Carson Wentz. He became the first quarterback in league history to throw for 4,000 yards without a single receiver registering 500 receiving yards. Carson Wentz had 7 touchdowns and 0 interceptions and averaging 299.8 yards per game during the 4-game winning streak to end the season. Philadelphia would ultimately make it into the playoffs, once again with a record of 9-7. They would go up against Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson's Seattle Seahawks in the wildcard round of the playoffs. But in this game, Carson Wentz would go down with yet another injury, this time from Seattle defensive end Jadeveon Clowney. The injury to Carson Wentz would force head coach Doug Peterson to throw in 40-year-old backup quarterback Josh McCown into the game. McCown would become the oldest quarterback to make his playoff debut at age 40. In the second quarter though, Josh McCown would too get injured, injuring his hamstring. But McCown showed great strength and will, finishing the game even though he had an injury. Despite the perseverance and determination from Josh McCown, Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll would prove to be too much for the Philadelphia Eagles, as they would win 17-9. In the 2019 NFL Draft, Howie Roseman and the Eagles front office would select wide receiver Jalen Reagor out of TCU. But Howie Roseman would once again miss out on another great wide receiver, this time in wide receiver Justin Jefferson out of LSU. Justin Jefferson looks like he is Minnesota's future #1 option and a future star in this league. He currently has 1,267 reception yards at the end of Week 16. But a bigger story for the Philadelphia Eagles coming out of the 2019 NFL Draft was Howie Roseman's decision to draft quarterback Jalen Hurts out of Oklahoma to back up Carson Wentz for the upcoming NFL season. This occurred just 1 year after signing Carson Wentz to a big 4-year contract extension. In addition, Eagles wide receiver Nelson Agholor would leave the team and head over to the Las Vegas Raiders in free agency after spending 5 seasons with the team. With the Las Vegas Raiders, Nelson Agholor is currently having the best statistical season of his NFL career. As the 2020 NFL season was set to kick off, many people either had the Dallas Cowboys or the Philadelphia Eagles taking the NFC East. But then, early on in the 2020 NFL season, star quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott, would go down with a gruesome leg injury. This made the Philadelphia Eagles the favorite to take the NFC East, in a division where the New York Giants weren't that good and the Washington football team were also terrible. But what few people expected was that Carson Wentz would go on to have the worst season of any NFL starting quarterback in the league this season. The 27-year-old signal caller would record one of the worst stats in the league. He would lead the league in interceptions, he would fumble the ball 10 times, he would rank 31st in the league on-target throws and completion percentage. The play of Carson Wentz would get worse and worse, with no signs of improvement. This forced many people to call for Jalen Hurts to be inserted into the starting lineup. Due to the horrendous play of Carson Wentz and the failures of the Philadelphia Eagles team, many heads started to turn towards Philadelphia head coach Doug Peterson. People started to speculate as to why Doug Peterson was so reluctant to start Jalen Hurts and keeping Carson Wentz as the starting quarterback. Questions about why Doug Peterson wasn't utilizing the Eagles' run game when his running game was averaging 5 yards a carry was starting to appear, and Doug Peterson started getting a lot of blame. And then finally, after many weeks of standing on the sideline, in Week 14, head coach Doug Peterson finally names Jalen Hurts as the starter for the game against the New Orleans Saints. Jalen Hurts would surprise many people by actually beating the New Orleans Saints, who had one of the hottest defenses at the time, and throwing for 167 yards, 1 touchdown, and 0 interceptions. The following week, Jalen Hurts would once again impress the NFL world when he almost forced overtime against the Arizona Cardinals while once again playing very, very well. But in the following week, the Philadelphia Eagles would suffer a crushing loss, 37-17 to the Dallas Cowboys, and ending the Philadelphia Eagles' playoff hopes for this NFL season. Due to the Philadelphia Eagles' disappointing season, owner Jeffrey Lurie and the Philadelphia Eagles will have huge decisions to make in the upcoming offseason. Will GM Howie Roseman be retained after his drafting failures and his inability to give the Eagles requisite weapons to succeed? What will Carson Wentz's future look like in Philadelphia? Who will be the starting quarterback next season for the Philadelphia Eagles? Will Doug Peterson be retained as well? Many questions flow around the Eagles organization, and the Eagles will be an interesting team to keep an eye out on this upcoming offseason. And that, everybody, is how the Philadelphia Eagles went from top of the NFL to the league's basement. If you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like and comment down below. Eagles fans, I want to know how you guys feel about your team right now. Thank you.